carriage wheels ground to a halt before Blackwood Hall on a fog-drenched morning in October 1871, and Marian Everleigh knew immediately that she had made a terrible mistake. The manor rose from the mist like a sleeping giant, all grey stone and shuttered windows, its towers clawing at the heavy sky. This was not the elegant country estate she'd imagined. This was a fortress, a prison, a place where something had gone deeply, irreversibly wrong. Marian pressed her palm against the cold glass, her breath fogging the window. She'd come because the salary was impossible to refuse. Because, after 3 years drifting between households, she needed stability. Because at 26, with no fortune and no prospects, she had precisely 2 choices: accept this position or return to her brother's charity, a burden he could ill afford. The carriage door swung open, and before the footman could lower the step, a blur of movement exploded from the manor's entrance. 2 children, a boy brandishing what appeared to be a fencing sword, a girl with wild hair and wilder eyes, came tearing across the gravel drive, pursued by a woman in an immaculate grey dress who moved with the precision of a general leading troops into battle. "Rowan, Lila, stop this instant." The woman's voice cut through the morning air like a whip. The children paid her no mind. They circled Marian's carriage like wolves assessing prey, the boy's wooden sword pointing directly at her window. "Another one," he announced to his sister. "Think this one will last a week?" "3 days," the girl replied solemnly. "That's my wager." And then Marian saw him. Lord Adrian Blackwood, Earl of Thornfield, stood in the doorway like a man carved from the same stone as his ancestral home. Tall, broad-shouldered, a face that might have been handsome if not for the scar that cut across his left cheek and the grief that had hollowed out his eyes. He watched the chaos unfolding in his drive with an expression that made Marian's chest tighten, not anger, not even frustration, but a resignation so complete it bordered on indifference. Their eyes met across the distance. Marian felt something shift in her chest, a recognition, a warning, a pull towards something she couldn't name. This man was drowning in plain sight, and his children were drowning with him. The elegant woman in grey, Miss Rosalind Pierce, Marian would soon learn, the other governess hired to compete for the position, finally reached the children and seized them each by an arm with practiced efficiency. "Your lordship," she called out, her voice honey-sweet despite the chaos, "I have the situation well in hand. Children respond to firm discipline, as I've always maintained." But Marian watched the boy Rowan, she remembered, go rigid in the woman's grip. Watched the girl's face close like a door slamming shut. Watched the light drain from their eyes until they looked less like wild things and more like prisoners. And she watched the Earl turn away without a word, disappearing back into the shadows of his house as if the scene before him were too painful to witness. Marian stepped down from the carriage, her worn boots crunching on the gravel. She'd been hired to tame wild children, but standing in the cold morning air, watching a broken family pretend to be whole, Marian realized she'd walked into something far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined, because the children weren't the only ones who needed saving. And the man retreating into the darkness of Blackwood Hall, the scarred, grieving Earl who couldn't even look at his own children without flinching, was about to awaken something in Marian she'd spent years trying to bury: hope, longing, and a dangerous, impossible desire that threatened to destroy everything she'd worked so hard to build. Marian Everleigh stepped into the entrance hall of Blackwood Hall and felt the weight of the place settle on her shoulders like a physical thing. The house was beautiful in the way abandoned cathedrals are beautiful, full of echoes and ghosts and potential that had curdled into decay. She was a woman who understood loss. Her mother had died when Marian was 15, leaving her to raise 3 younger siblings while her father retreated into his parish work. She learned early that grief made people do strange things, withdraw, lash out, disappear into themselves until they became unrecognizable. At 26, Marian Everleigh possessed no great beauty. Her features were pleasant but unremarkable, her brown hair perpetually escaping its pins, her grey eyes too serious for current fashion, but she had something more valuable than beauty. She had survived, and survival had taught her to see what others missed. Mrs. Bramwell, the housekeeper, was a woman built like a ship's figurehead, solid, immovable, designed to withstand storms. She assessed Marian with the kind of look that could strip paint from walls. "You're the 7th governess in 18 months, she stated. "Not a question, an accusation." "Then I suppose I should try not to be the 8th to leave," Marian replied evenly. Something flickered in the housekeeper's eyes. Respect, perhaps, or pity. "The children are difficult. Children who've lost their mother usually are." Mrs. Bramwell's expression softened a fraction. 2 years ago, riding accident. The Countess was thrown, broke her neck. His lordship was riding with her. He tried to. She stopped, as if the memory were too painful even for a servant who had merely witnessed the aftermath. "He hasn't been the same since. None of them have." Marian absorbed this information like a scholar studying a text. A traumatic death witnessed by the Earl, children who'd lost their mother violently, a household frozen in grief. "And Miss Pierce?" Marian asked carefully. "The other governess." His lordship, hired 2 this time, thought competition might motivate the children to better behavior. Mrs. Bramwell's tone suggested what she thought of this strategy. "Miss Pierce comes highly recommended, daughter of a baronet, educated at the finest schools, all the proper credentials. Unlike you." Marian heard in the silence that followed. "I see. You'll share teaching duties. Alternate days. His lordship will observe and make his final selection by month's end." "Mrs." Bramwell began climbing the stairs. "Miss Pierce has already begun with the children this morning. You'll meet them at luncheon. His lordship takes his meals in his study and is not to be disturbed." Marian followed the housekeeper up 3 flights to the nursery wing, her mind cataloguing everything she observed. The portrait of a beautiful woman with kind eyes, the late Countess, the locked door with a worn handle, as if someone had tried to open it many times, the silence that felt less like peace and more like held breath. Her room was small but comfortable, with a view of the gardens, or what had once been gardens. Now they were a tangle of overgrown roses and unpruned hedges, beauty turned savage by neglect. Marian unpacked her few belongings and changed into a fresh dress, her second best, saving her best for meeting the Earl formally, and prepared herself for battle. Because that's what this was, she realized, a competition, and Miss Rosalind Pierce had a significant advantage. When Marian descended to the schoolroom just before luncheon, she heard Miss Pierce before she saw her. "No, Lila, we form our letters properly. See how yours slants? That's laziness, pure and simple. Again." The schoolroom was pristine, almost militarily organized. Books arranged by height, supplies in labeled containers, not a speck of dust anywhere. And in the middle of this perfect order sat 2 children who looked like they were being slowly suffocated. Rowan was 10, Marian knew from her briefing materials. He had his father's dark hair and strong features, but where the Earl's face showed resignation, Rowan's showed barely controlled fury. His knuckles were white where he gripped his pencil. Lila was 8, with golden curls and her mother's delicate features, but her blue eyes held a wildness that suggested she was merely biding her time, waiting for the moment to strike. Miss Rosalind Pierce stood over them like a marble statue, beautiful, cold, perfect in every detail. Her blonde hair was arranged in an elaborate style that must have taken an hour. Her dress was the latest fashion, impeccably tailored. Her posture would have made a dancing master weep with joy. She was everything Marian was not. "Miss Everly," Rosalind said, her tone suggesting Marian's presence was both expected and unwelcome. "How prompt. Children, greet Miss Everly properly." Rowan and Lila rose in unison, their movements mechanical. "Good afternoon, Miss Everly," they recited in flat voices. "Good afternoon, Rowan." "Lila." Marian stepped fully into the room. "What are we working on?" "Penmanship," Rosalind replied. "The foundation of all civilized communication. One cannot expect to take one's proper place in society without elegant handwriting." Marian glanced at the children's slates. The letters were serviceable but joyless, copied again and again in identical rows. "I see. And do you enjoy penmanship, Lila?" The question seemed to startle the girl. She glanced at Miss Pierce, then at Marian, uncertain which answer would get her in less trouble. "She enjoys what she's told to enjoy," Rosalind interjected smoothly. "Children thrive on structure and discipline, Miss Everly. I'm sure you'll find my methods produce results." "I'm sure they do," Marian agreed, her tone pleasant. But she noted the way Rowan's jaw clenched, the way Lila's hands trembled slightly. These weren't wild children. These were terrified children, pretending to be good. And that, Marian thought, was so much worse. Marian discovered the locked wing on her third night at Blackwood Hall. She'd been restless, unable to sleep in the unfamiliar room, and had wandered the corridors with only a candle to guide her. The door was at the end of the east hallway, its handle worn smooth by countless attempts to open it. She reached out, curiosity overcoming caution, and the door swung open easily. It had never been locked at all. The room beyond took her breath away. It was a lady's sitting room, frozen in time. Embroidery lay abandoned on a chair, books stacked beside a reading lamp, a riding habit draped over a screen as if its owner had just stepped away and would return any moment. This had been the Countess's private sanctuary, and no one had touched it in 2 years. "You shouldn't be here." The Earl's voice came from the darkness behind her, rough, with something between anger and anguish. Marian turned to find him disheveled, his cravat loosened, holding a glass of what she suspected was not his first drink of the evening. In the candlelight, his scar seemed deeper, a canyon carved by grief. "I'm sorry, my lord. I didn't mean to intrude. Everyone intrudes. Everyone has an opinion about what I should do with this room. Rosalind thinks I should clear it out, move forward, stop dwelling in the past." He stepped into the doorway, his eyes scanning the familiar space with hunger and pain, as if grief were a coat one could simply remove when it became unfashionable. Marian studied him carefully. Some people need the past to stay exactly where it is, not as a prison, but as a reminder that what they lost was real, that it mattered. Something flickered across his face. He looked at her properly for the first time since she'd arrived. "You understand? I understand that your children need to know their mother existed, that she was real, that loving her doesn't mean betraying her memory by learning to live again." Marian kept her voice gentle. "And I understand that you're terrified of forgetting her, but my lord, you're not haunted by her ghost, you're haunted by your own guilt for surviving." The Earl's hand tightened on his glass. For a moment, Marian thought she'd gone too far. Then his shoulders sagged, and he looked suddenly, devastatingly human. "I was supposed to check the saddle. I always checked the saddle. That morning, I was distracted, angry about something meaningless. I didn't check. The girth was loose. When her horse jumped, the saddle slipped. She fell. I watched her die because I failed to do something I'd done 1,000 times before." Marian's heart broke for him. "It was an accident. You didn't kill her. Grief did this to you, not guilt, and your children are paying the price." His eyes met hers, dark and tortured. "What would you have me do?" "Live," Marian said simply. "Just start by living." The rain came down in sheets the next morning, trapping everyone indoors. Rosalind declared it a perfect day for intensive study and arranged the children in the schoolroom with military precision. Latin conjugations for Rowan, French vocabulary for Lila. No deviation from the schedule. Marian watched from the doorway as the children's shoulders hunched, their spirits dimming with each passing minute. When Rosalind excused herself to speak with Mrs. Bramwell about luncheon arrangements, Marian saw her opportunity. "Tell me," she said, settling into the chair Rosalind had vacated. "What do you love? Not what you're supposed to love. What actually makes you happy?" Rowan looked at her with deep suspicion. "Is this a trick?" "No trick. I genuinely want to know." Lila glanced at her brother, then whispered, "I like the stables, the horses, especially Moonlight. She was Mama's mare. Father won't let us near her anymore, but sometimes I sneak down and talk to her." "And you, Rowan?" The boy's defenses cracked slightly. "Strategy. Battle tactics. I have books about military campaigns. Wellington at Waterloo. Caesar in Gaul. Miss Pierce says they're inappropriate for children, but Father gave them to me before he stopped caring." Marian's mind raced. "What if we made your lessons about the things you love? Rowan, you could read Caesar in the original Latin. Lila, you could study French through veterinary texts about horses. Learning doesn't have to be a punishment." "Miss Pierce won't allow it," Rowan said flatly. "Miss Pierce isn't here right now. I am." For the next hour, Marian watched the children transform. Rowan bent over his Latin with genuine interest, translating passages about military formations. Lila carefully sounded out French words in a text about equine anatomy, her face alight with concentration. They were brilliant, Marian realized. They'd just never been taught in a way that honored their intelligence. When Rosalind returned and saw them engaged with materials she hadn't approved, her smile could have frozen fire. "How creative, Miss Everly, though I wonder if his lordship would approve of such unconventional methods." "Then perhaps we should ask him," Marian replied sweetly. That evening, the Earl appeared at dinner for the first time in months. He said nothing, but Marian noticed him watching his children with something that looked almost like recognition, as if he were remembering who they used to be. Rosalind monopolized the conversation, discussing her methods and the children's need for proper discipline. But when Rowan mentioned Caesar's tactics at Alesia, the Earl's head snapped up. "You're reading the Gallic Wars?" "Miss Everly suggested it, Father. She said I could learn Latin through the campaigns." The Earl's eyes found Marian across the table. Something passed between them. Understanding. Gratitude. The first fragile thread of connection. Rosalind saw it too. Her expression remained pleasant, but Marian recognized the look of a woman who'd just identified an enemy. The invitation to Lady Ashworth's winter tea arrived on a grey December morning. Mrs. Bramwell delivered it with the kind of careful neutrality that suggested trouble. "His lordship has accepted. You're both to accompany the family. The children will be presented." Rosalind's satisfaction was immediate. "How wonderful. The children need to be reintroduced to society, with proper guidance, of course." Her eyes slid to Marian. One must make the right impression. Marian felt the first stirrings of unease. She had one decent dress, already altered twice to follow changing fashions. No jewelry except her mother's simple pearls. No understanding of the intricate social hierarchies that governed country society. Rosalind, meanwhile, appeared in a gown of deep crimson silk that must have cost more than Marian earned in a year. The Ashworth estate blazed with light and warmth. Inside, county families gathered like peacocks, displaying their feathers, the Thorntons, the Blackwoods, the Ashcrofts, all the old names, all watching the Earl's arrival with predatory interest. Marian saw immediately how they assessed him, wealthy widower, eligible, vulnerable, and how they assessed his children, unruly, problematic, in need of proper feminine influence. Lord Blackwood. Lady Ashworth descended like a ship under full sail. How delightful! And these must be your children. How they've grown. And your governesses. Her eyes raked over Marian and Rosalind. Too, I understand. How very thorough. We believe in providing the children with comprehensive education, Rosalind said smoothly, inserting herself into the conversation, though naturally, some approaches are more suitable than others. The barb was subtle but clear. Marian felt the room's attention shift to her, assessing, judging, finding her wanting. She was the daughter of a country vicar, educated but poor, refined but not refined enough. She was exactly the kind of woman these people could safely dismiss. Lila clutched Marian's hand tightly. I don't like it here. Everyone's staring. Then let them stare, Marian whispered back. We know who we are. But throughout the afternoon, Marian noticed Rosalind circulating, speaking quietly to this matron and that lady, always with a concerned expression, always glancing meaningfully at the Earl. Lady Ashworth's eyes grew sharper, Mrs. Thornton's smile more calculating. By the time they departed, Marian felt as if she'd been carefully dissected and found lacking in every particular. In the carriage home, the Earl was silent, his jaw tight. The children huddled close to Marian. Only Rosalind seemed pleased, her expression serene as a cat who'd found the cream. That went well, she murmured. Don't you think, Miss Everleigh? Marian didn't answer, but she understood with sudden, chilling clarity that she'd underestimated her rival. Rosalind wasn't just competing for a position, she was orchestrating Marian's complete destruction. The Blackwood Winter Gala was tradition, Mrs. Bramwell explained. The Earl's father had hosted it for 40 years. The Earl himself had continued it during his marriage. After the Countess's death, the tradition had lapsed. Now, under pressure from county society and Rosalind's gentle insistence that it would be healing for the children to see their home alive again, the Earl had reluctantly agreed to revive it. Marian spent the week before the gala watching Blackwood Hall transform. Servants polished silver and cleaned chandeliers. The ballroom, closed for 2 years, was opened and aired. Florists arrived with arrangements. The house began to breathe again, but the Earl looked more haunted with each passing day. He's not ready, Marian told Mrs. Bramwell. This is too much, too soon. Miss Pierce thinks it's exactly what's needed. The housekeeper's tone suggested her own doubts, but her loyalty prevented her from saying more. The night of the gala arrived cold and clear. Marian dressed the children with care. Rowan in his formal suit, uncomfortable but handsome. Lila in white silk with blue ribbons, looking heartbreakingly like the portrait of her mother that hung in the gallery. Marian herself wore her best dress, simple dove grey, that made her look exactly what she was, the governess. Rosalind, by contrast, wore emerald silk that must have come from London, cut to showcase her figure and colouring. She moved through the arriving guests like she already owned the house, directing servants, greeting families, positioning herself as the natural mistress of Blackwood Hall. The Earl stood near the ballroom entrance, greeting guests with mechanical courtesy. Marian saw how his hand trembled slightly, how his eyes kept drifting to the place where his wife would have stood, how he was drowning in plain sight, and no one seemed to notice or care. Lady Ashworth arrived with an entourage, her daughters arrayed like soldiers for battle. Within minutes, she'd cornered the Earl. speaking loudly enough for others to hear. "Such a wonderful evening, my lord, though one does notice certain absences. A house needs a proper mistress, don't you think? Someone who understands how things should be done." The Earl murmured something non-committal. Lady Ashworth pressed on. "Your children, for instance, they seem improved, though I understand their education has been somewhat irregular. 2 governesses must be terribly confusing for them, and one of them so." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Her meaning was crystal clear, and from the way conversations around them quieted, everyone understood Marian was unsuitable. An embarrassment, a mistake the Earl needed to correct. Rosalind materialized at Lady Ashworth's elbow. "You're too kind, Lady Ashworth, though I must agree that consistency is vital for children, especially children who've experienced such trauma. They need structure, discipline, a firm hand. Too much sentimentality can be damaging." Marian felt the words like blows. But worse, she saw the children's faces. Rowan had gone rigid. Lila's eyes filled with tears. They understood exactly what was being said, that Marian wasn't good enough, that she would be sent away like all the others. Lady Ashworth's smile grew sharper. Perhaps it would be best if the children retired early. Such a late evening might overstimulate them. "Miss Everly, perhaps you should take them upstairs." It was a dismissal, a public humiliation designed to put Marian in her place and demonstrate to everyone present that she was merely a servant, easily ordered about. Marian saw the Earl's face go pale, saw him struggle with the same paralysis that had gripped him since his wife's death, and she saw Lila begin to cry. Something in Marian snapped. She'd spent her life being dismissed, overlooked, judged, insufficient. But she would not stand by and let these cruel people hurt these children. "No," Marian said clearly. Every conversation in the ballroom stopped. "No, I will not take the children upstairs. They are the children of this house. They belong here more than any of us. And if you cannot see that, Lady Ashworth, then perhaps you don't belong here." The gasp that rippled through the ballroom was almost audible. Lady Ashworth's face went purple. "How dare you? Lord Blackwood, are you going to allow your servant to speak to me this way?" Marian turned to the Earl, her heart pounding. This was it. He would dismiss her, side with society, retreat back into his shell of grief and propriety. She'd gambled and lost. But then something extraordinary happened. The Earl stepped forward, moving to stand beside Marian. Not in front of her, beside her. "Miss Everly is right," he said, his voice low but carrying. "These are my children. This is their home, and anyone who makes them feel unwelcome in it can leave. I need to pause our story here for just a moment, because I need your help. You're here, watching this, investing your time in Marian and the Earl's journey, and that means the world to me. But here's the truth. I pour my heart into every story, research every historical detail, craft every emotion to make you feel something real. And I do it all for free, asking for nothing except this one small thing. Please, please help me reach 5,000 subscribers. I know that number might seem arbitrary, but it's not. It's the difference between this channel surviving or disappearing. It's the threshold that tells YouTube this content matters, that these stories of love, courage, and second chances deserve to be shared. If this story has touched you, if you've felt Marian's fear or the Earl's pain, if you've wanted to reach through the screen and hug those wounded children, then please take 5 seconds to click that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Share this with someone who loves historical romance. You have no idea how much it means. Every single subscriber is a vote of confidence that keeps me going. So please, help me get to 5,000. Help me keep telling these stories. Now, let's get back to Marian and see what happens next." The silence after the Earl's declaration lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Then Lady Ashworth gathered her daughters and swept from the ballroom in a rustle of offended silk. 6 families followed, scandal and indignation trailing behind them like perfume. The remaining guests stood frozen, unsure whether to flee or stay. The Earl turned to the musicians. "Play," he commanded. Then, to the remaining guests, "Those who wish to leave may do so. Those who wish to stay are welcome." He looked down at his children, both trembling, both staring at him as if seeing a stranger. "Rowan, Lila, would you like to stay, or would you prefer to retire?" "Stay," Lila whispered. "Please, Father, can we stay?" Something broke in the Earl's face. He knelt, heedless of his formal clothes, and pulled both children into his arms. Marian watched as his shoulders shook, watched him hold them as if they were the only solid things in a world gone liquid. When he finally stood, his eyes were wet, but there was something new in them. Awareness, presence, life. The music started. The remaining guests, fewer, but perhaps better for it, began to dance, and the Earl, still holding his daughter's hand, turned to Marian. "Miss Everly, would you do me the honor?" Marian's heart stopped. A governess dancing with an Earl was scandalous. After the scene they'd just caused, it would be ruinous. "My lord, I don't think. I'm not asking as an Earl. I'm asking as a man who owes you everything." His eyes held hers. "Please." She took his hand. Dancing with Lord Adrian Blackwood was nothing like Marian had imagined during her girlhood dreams. He held her correctly, but not distantly. His hand at her waist was warm. When he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she'd never experienced, not as a governess, not as a woman of no particular importance, but as herself, entirely, completely herself. "Thank you," he said quietly, as they moved through the waltz, "for defending them, for seeing what I was too blind to see. You weren't blind, my lord. You were drowning, and you threw me a rope." His grip tightened slightly. "Miss Everly Marian, I need you to understand something. What happened tonight, what I said, it changes things. Society will talk. Your reputation may suffer. If you wish to leave, I would understand. I would give you excellent references." Marian met his eyes steadily. "Do you want me to leave?" "God, no." The words came out rough, almost desperate. "I want you to stay. The children need you. I need you. But I won't trap you here if it means destroying your future prospects." "What prospects, my lord?" "I'm 26 years old with no fortune and no family connections. My prospects have always been precisely what I make of them." She smiled slightly. "And right now, I'm making them here." The dance ended. Marian curtsied. The Earl bowed. And across the ballroom, Marian saw Rosalind watching them with an expression of such cold fury it made her blood run cold. The rival governess's mask had finally slipped, and what lay beneath was dangerous. The next morning brought an unexpected invitation. Lord Ashworth, Lady Ashworth's more reasonable cousin, invited them to London for the remainder of the season. "My wife and I would be honored to sponsor the children's introduction to society," his letter read, "and perhaps a change of scenery would benefit everyone." The Earl accepted. Within a week, Blackwood Hall was closed up, and they were traveling to London. Marian had never been to the capital. She pressed her face to the carriage window like a child, watching the countryside give way to townhouses and cobbled streets, and a chaos of life that took her breath away. London transformed everything. Away from the grief-soaked manor, the Earl seemed to shed years. He took them to museums and parks. He laughed at Rowan's observations about Roman military tactics at the Tower. He bought Lila ices at Gunter's. and every evening, after the children were in bed, he sought Marian out in the library, on the terrace, in quiet corners where they could talk without servants listening. They discussed everything: his childhood, her family, books and philosophy, and the question of whether love could survive loss. Marian found herself telling him things she'd never told anyone about her fear of becoming invisible, about her desperate need to matter, about the loneliness that came from always being the outsider. "You're not invisible to me," he said one evening as they stood on Lord Ashworth's terrace overlooking the London gardens. "You're the most vivid thing in my world." Marian's breath caught. "My lord, Adrian," he corrected gently. "When we're alone, please call me Adrian. Adrian." His name felt dangerous on her tongue. "You know this is impossible, is it?" He turned to face her fully, and Marian saw everything in his eyes: desire, hope, fear. "A year ago I would have agreed, but you've taught me that impossible things can become possible if you're brave enough to try. You were brave for my children. For me, can't I be brave for you? Society will never accept it. I'm nobody. You're everything." His hand rose as if to touch her face, then fell. "Marian, I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility. Could you love a broken man? Could you be happy in a world that might always whisper about you? Could you become not just a mother to my children, but my wife?" Marian stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You're asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to think about it, to imagine what our life could be." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I can't stop imagining it. You, me, the children, a family built on choice rather than obligation, on love rather than duty." Marian opened her mouth to answer, but voices from inside the house interrupted them. The moment shattered. Adrian stepped back, propriety reasserting itself, but as Marian went inside, his words echoed in her mind. Could she really imagine a future as the Countess of Thornfield? Yes, she realized with breathless certainty. Yes, she could. But first, they would have to survive Rosalind's revenge. The rumors started quietly, whispered in drawing rooms and hinted at behind fans. By the time Marian heard about it, the damage was already done. According to sources close to the family, the Earl's new governess had entrapped him through manipulation and inappropriate behavior. She'd deliberately undermined the children's proper education. She'd schemed her way into his affections. Worst of all, she'd been dismissed from her previous position for improper conduct with her employer. None of it was true. All of it was believed. Marian first understood the extent of the disaster when Lady Ashworth's wife, her sponsor and protector, summoned her to the morning room with an expression of deep concern. "My dear Miss Everleigh, I must ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Is there any truth to these allegations?" "What allegations?" Marian's voice came out steadier than she felt. "That you were dismissed from the Thornton household, that there was an incident with Lord Thornton, that you came to Blackwood Hall under false pretenses." Marian's blood ran cold. She'd worked for the Thorntons years ago briefly, before Lady Thornton had died and the household was dissolved. There had been no scandal, no impropriety, just the natural end of a position when her employer passed away. But someone had twisted the truth into something ugly. "None of that is true, Lady Ashworth. I left the Thorntons because Lady Thornton died. Lord Thornton gave me excellent references. I came to Blackwood Hall honestly." "I believe you," Lady Ashworth said, but her expression was troubled. "But my dear, the rumor is everywhere, and people are saying that Miss Pierce tried to warn his lordship, but he was too besotted to listen, that you've compromised him deliberately." "Rosalind." Of course, it was Rosalind. Marian should have seen this coming. The rival governess backed into a corner, watching her position slip away, reaching for the only weapon that could destroy Marian completely. Her reputation. What do I do? Marian asked. Tell Lord Blackwood immediately. Let him handle this. Lady Ashworth's face softened. And, my dear, if there are feelings between you, perhaps it would be wise to consider whether this is a battle worth fighting. Marian found Adrian in Lord Ashworth's library, reading correspondence. He looked up when she entered, and his expression immediately shifted from pleasure to concern. Marian, what's wrong? She told him everything. Watched his face darken with each word. When she finished, he was on his feet, pacing like a caged animal. Rosalind, he said flatly, she did this. I think so, but Adrian, she's clever. She hasn't said anything directly. It's all whispers and implications. We can't prove anything. I don't need proof. His voice was cold. I need to end this. Tonight. How? He turned to face her, and Marian saw something new in his eyes, not the broken, haunted man she'd first met, but someone whole and fierce and ready to fight. By choosing you, publicly, irrevocably, in front of everyone who matters. Marian's heart stuttered. Adrian, if you do that, if you declare yourself now, after these rumors, the scandal will be catastrophic. You'll lose standing. The children will suffer. I won't let you destroy yourself for me. Then let me destroy myself with you. He crossed to her, taking her hands. Marian, I've been dead for 2 years. You brought me back to life. You gave me back my children. You made me remember what it feels like to hope, to laugh, to want something beyond just surviving the next day. I will not let Rosalind or anyone else take that away. I will not let them hurt you and do nothing. But the children love you. They want you to be their mother. Rowan told me yesterday that he prays every night that I'll marry you. Lila asked me last week if you could stay forever. His grip tightened. Marian, my family wants you. I want you. The only question is, do you want us? Marian looked into his eyes and saw her entire future balanced on this moment. She could say no, protect herself, walk away and save them all from scandal, return to her safe, small life of being invisible. Or she could be brave. Yes, she whispered. God help me. Yes. I want you. I want them. I want all of it. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and Marian felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was where she belonged. This was her family. Then trust me, he murmured against her hair. Trust me to handle this. Tomorrow night, at the Devoncourt ball, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly where I stand. Marian nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. Tomorrow, everything would change. For better or worse, there would be no going back. The Devoncourt Ball was the social event of the season. Hundreds of guests, every important family in attendance, the kind of gathering where reputations were made and destroyed. Marian dressed with trembling hands, knowing that tonight would determine her entire future. Lady Ashworth had insisted she borrow a gown deep sapphire silk that made Marian's grey eyes luminous and her figure elegant. If you're going to face London society, you'll do it looking like you belong, she'd said firmly. When Marian descended the stairs, Adrian was waiting in the entrance hall. He looked at her with such open admiration that Marian felt her cheeks flush. You're beautiful, he said simply. I'm terrified. So am I. He offered his arm. But we'll be terrified together. The Devoncourt mansion blazed with light and music. Inside, London's elite gathered in their finest, already buzzing with gossip. Marian felt the weight of their stares the moment she entered on Adrian's arm. Whispers followed them like a wake. That's her. The governess. I heard the most shocking things. Rosalind was already there, resplendent in rose silk, holding court with several influential matrons. When she saw Marian and Adrian enter together, her expression flickered just for a moment with something like panic. Then her social mask snapped back into place. Adrian led Marian directly to their hosts. "Lord Devoncourt, Lady Devoncourt, thank you for the invitation. May I introduce Miss Marian Everleigh?" Lady Devoncourt, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, known for her progressive views, assessed Marian openly. "Miss Everleigh, we've heard quite a bit about you." "I imagine you have, my lady," Marian replied steadily. "Though I suspect not all of it was accurate." "I suspect you're right." Lady Devoncourt's lips quirked. "I make it a policy to judge people by their actions rather than gossip. From what Lord Ashworth tells me, your actions speak well of you." It was a small victory, but Marian felt her confidence strengthen. Then Adrian touched her arm gently. "Will you excuse us? There's something I need to do." He led Marian to the center of the ballroom. The orchestra was between sets. Conversations continued around them, but Adrian raised his hand, and somehow, through sheer force of presence, the room quieted. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying clearly, "I ask for your attention for just a moment." The whispers stopped. Every eye turned to them. Marian's heart hammered so hard she thought it might escape her chest. Beside her, Adrian stood tall, the Earl of Thornfield in full command, and she'd never loved him more. "Many of you knew my late wife. She was a remarkable woman, and her loss devastated me. For 2 years, I've been a ghost in my own life, unable to be the father my children needed or the man I wanted to be. I had resigned myself to simply existing rather than truly living." He paused, letting his words settle. Marian saw Rosalind's face go pale. Then Miss Marian Everleigh came to Blackwood Hall. She was hired as a governess, but she became so much more. She saved my children when I couldn't. She had the courage to tell me truths I needed to hear. She brought light back into a house that had forgotten what happiness felt like. Adrian turned to Marian, his expression open and vulnerable in a way that made her breath catch. "She reminded me that love doesn't run out. That choosing to live again isn't betraying the past, it's honoring it by refusing to waste the future." Marian felt tears streaming down her face. Around them, the ballroom was utterly silent. "Recently, rumors have circulated about Miss Everleigh, vicious lies designed to damage her reputation and separate her from my family. I won't dignify those lies by repeating them. I will simply say this. Miss Everleigh is a woman of impeccable character, extraordinary intelligence, and remarkable courage. She has been nothing but honorable in every aspect of her conduct." He took Marian's hand, raising it so everyone could see the gesture clearly. "And I am deeply, irrevocably in love with her. Tonight, in front of all of you, I am formally declaring my intention to make her my wife, not because she entrapped me, not because I was manipulated, but because she is the finest woman I have ever known. And I am honored that she's chosen to take a chance on a broken man and his wounded children." The gasp that rippled through the ballroom was audible. Somewhere in the crowd, a fan clattered to the floor. Adrian's eyes never left Marian's face. "Miss Everleigh, I know I'm doing this all backward. I know I should have asked you privately first, but I needed everyone to understand that I am proud to love you. That I would shout it from the rooftops if it meant protecting you from those who would hurt you. So I'm asking you now, in front of all these witnesses, Marian Everleigh, will you marry me?" Marian couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only nod as tears streamed down her face. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, Adrian, yes." He pulled her into his arms, propriety be damned, and kissed her. The ballroom erupted, some in applause, some in shocked exclamations, some in scandalized gasps. Marian didn't care. All she cared about was Adrian's arms around her and the knowledge that he had chosen her, publicly, irrevocably. When they finally broke apart, Lady Devoncourt was beaming. "Well," she declared loudly, "that was the most romantic thing I've seen in 30 years. Congratulations, Lord Blackwood. You've chosen wisely." Her endorsement opened the floodgates. Within moments, they were surrounded by well-wishers, some genuine, some opportunistic, all eager to be associated with the scandal-turned-romance. Marian saw Lord Ashworth shaking Adrian's hand, Lady Ashworth embracing her with tears in her eyes. And across the ballroom, through the crowd, Marian saw Rosalind. The rival governess stood alone, her face a mask of devastation and rage. For just a moment, their eyes met. Marian felt a flash of pity. Rosalind had played for the highest stakes and lost everything. Then Rosalind turned and disappeared into the crowd. Marian never saw her again. Later, as they rode home in the carriage, Adrian held Marian close. "I meant every word," he said quietly. "You are the finest woman I've ever known. You destroyed your reputation for me. No, I destroyed malicious gossip and chose love instead. There's a difference." He kissed her forehead. "Marian, I've learned something these past months. Reputation without happiness is worthless. I'd rather be scandalous and whole than respectable and empty." Marian leaned into his warmth, finally allowing herself to believe it was real. She was going to marry the Earl of Thornfield. She was going to be a countess. She was going to be a mother to Rowan and Lila. She was going to have the family she'd always wanted. The wedding took place in June at the small chapel on the Blackwood estate. Marian had insisted on simplicity, no grand society spectacle, just family and true friends. Her brother performed the ceremony, his voice thick with emotion as he joined Marian's hand with Adrian's. Rowan and Lila stood as witnesses, both dressed in their finest, both glowing with a happiness that made Marian's heart overflow. When the vows were complete and Adrian kissed his bride, both children cheered so loudly the chapel rang with it. The wedding breakfast was held in the restored gardens of Blackwood Hall. The roses had been pruned back to health, the paths cleared, the wilderness transformed into beauty. It felt symbolic somehow, this family emerging from darkness into light. As the sun began to set, Adrian found Marian standing alone near the stables, watching Lila show Rowan something in Moonlight's stall. The children were laughing, unguarded and free in a way they hadn't been when Marian first arrived. "Having second thoughts?" Adrian asked, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. Marian leaned back against him. "Not even for a moment. Just thinking about how far we've all come. We've come exactly where we were meant to be." He turned her to face him. "Marian Blackwood, Countess of Thornfield. How does it feel? Strange, wonderful, terrifying?" She smiled. "Like coming home to a place I've never been before. That's what you've given us, a home we'd forgotten how to build." Adrian's expression grew serious. "I need you to understand something. I know society will always whisper. Some people will never accept that a governess became a countess. There will be difficulties ahead, I know, but I also know this. You are the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I've ever met. You walked into a broken household and refused to let us stay broken. You fought for my children when I was too lost to fight for them myself. You loved us when we were utterly unlovable." His voice caught. "You saved us, Marian, all of us." "We saved each other," Marian corrected gently. "That's what families do." Rowan and Lila emerged from the stables, saw them standing together, and ran over. Lila threw her arms around Marian's waist. "Mama," she said the first time she'd used the word. Rowan said, "We can help plan the nursery for the new baby. Can we?" Marian's hand went instinctively to her still flat stomach. The pregnancy was new, barely confirmed, a secret she and Adrian had shared with no one yet. She looked at Adrian with wide eyes. "Rowan," Adrian said slowly, "how did you know?" The boy shrugged with the infinite wisdom of 10-year-olds. "You keep smiling at each other like you have a secret. And Mrs. Bramwell said Mama was looking peaky in the mornings. I'm not stupid, Father." Adrian burst out laughing, the sound rich and genuine and so full of life that Marian felt tears spring to her eyes. This was her family, her impossible, wonderful, perfectly imperfect family. "Yes," she told Lila, pulling both children close. "Yes, you can help with the nursery. You can help with everything. Because that's what we are now, a family. All of us together. A family built, not born," Adrian added, his arm around Marian's shoulders, his other hand resting on Rowan's head. They stood there as the sun set over Blackwood Hall, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Marian thought about the terrified woman who'd arrived here 8 months ago, expecting wild children and finding wounded souls instead. She thought about all the battles they'd fought against grief, against society, against their own fears. And she thought about what came next, a lifetime of love and challenge, of raising children and building a future, of proving every single day that worth had nothing to do with birth and everything to do with character. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be whispers and judgment and people who would never truly accept her. But Marian had learned something vital. She didn't need universal acceptance. She just needed the love of the people who mattered. And she had that, in abundance. "Come on," Adrian said, breaking into her reverie. "Our guests are waiting. We have a celebration to attend." Our guests, our celebration, our family. Marian tested the words, loving how they sounded. "I could get used to that." "Good," Adrian said, pulling her close for another kiss. "Because you have the rest of your life to practice." They walked back to the house together with Marian and Adrian, Rowan and Lila, a family forged in fire and grief, and ultimately, in love. Behind them, Blackwood Hall glowed with light and music and laughter. The ghosts were finally gone. In their place was something infinitely more precious, a future full of possibility, built on courage, sealed with love, and sustained by the unshakable knowledge that sometimes the most broken things, when carefully mended, become the strongest of all. Marian Blackwood had been hired to tame wild children. Instead, she had tamed her own fears, opened her own heart, and discovered that love, when you were brave enough to fight for it, could conquer anything, even the impossible. So that's Marian and Adrian's story. A tale of courage, overcoming convention, of love triumphing over loss, of a family built not by blood alone, but by choice, by bravery, by refusing to let grief have the final word. If this story touched you, if you felt Marian's fear or Adrian's pain, if you celebrated when he chose her in front of all London, then I need you to do something for me right now. Not tomorrow, not later, right now. Smash that subscribe button. Don't just tap it, demolish it. Because here's what that button means. It means you want more stories like this. It means you believe in love that breaks all the rules. It means you're part of this community we're building, one story at a time. Drop a comment and tell me, what was your favorite moment? Was it when Marian defended the children? When Adrian made his public declaration? When Lila first called Marian Mama? I read every single comment, and your words fuel my passion for creating these stories. Share this video with someone who loves historical romance, who believes in second chances, who needs to be reminded that it's never too late to fight for happiness. Thank you for being here. Thank you for investing your time, your emotions, your heart into Marion and Adrian's journey. Thank you for believing, as I do, that love is real, messy, complicated, impossible. Love is always worth fighting for. Until next time, keep believing in second chances, keep fighting for the impossible, and keep coming back for more stories that will make you feel everything. I'll see you in the next one.